this is a really big deal right now. And a lot of young people are paying attention. My sister's actually paying attention to this. This is an Orwellian anti-riot bill. It's a bill that passed the state house in Florida. It's still got to go through the state Senate. It's called HB-1. And
House Bill 1.
I just want to throw it out because I made this into 2 sections. So we're going to talk first about America, but the UK is also experiencing massive hits to free press, speech, and privacy. But this is in Florida. In Florida, this gives police power to use violence on protesters. It basically gives them the ability to mark protesters as rioters. So just an overboard, they approved this bill, and it's HB-1. It's called the Combating Public Disorder Act, and it cleared the House on Friday. 79 yeas, 39 nays, spearheaded by Governor Ron DeSantis, following the Black Lives Matter protests last year. And, of course, doubling down after the U.S. Capitol riot in January. So he claims that this is going to be across the board, not hyper-partisan. But the opponents argued that it's attack on First Amendment rights. It absolutely is. And supporters argued it will protect law enforcement and prevent public disorder, which was seen at the Capitol riot and across the country. Democrats tried to amend the proposal. It didn't happen. It's a GOP majority, so none of that happened. And then, God, I hate these ads that pop up. Yeah. And then they rallied against it for a while, saying that the language is too broad. I have a problem with any bill where the language is too broad. And we've criticized these bills that have too broad of a language because it basically makes any protester a rioter. And we're going to go exactly how that happens. But under this definition, if you have a large group of people who are if only 3 of them do something bad, everybody else there is participating in a riot. So by definition, that is just encompassing everything.
Ridiculous.
It's a bill that creates a potential for widespread abuse, etc. And they say, it's going to affect disproportionately these BLM protesters or protesters against police violence, right? Okay, so basically they can dictate what a protest is and what is a riot, and they can exert violence on protesters, meaning they can do whatever it takes to calm down this riot. So let's look at the actual legislation, Johnny. If you go to the House Florida Senate, and it's right there. It's the same thing. It has a twin bill in the Senate. In the House, it's the same thing, just different name. It passed the House, so now it's going to go on to the Senate. Basically, it's an act relating to combating public disorder is what it's called. And basically, they're going to increase the amount of severity that happens when you have when you attack an officer, when you attack a public, a federal building or a historical monument. So again, this is the Republicans going after the liberals or some on the left who have taken down monuments that are from the civil rights, that are Confederate flags, all Confederate statues. This is it's in the language directly saying that is potentially up to a felony. So let's go over some of this really quick. So page 12, the first picture I have there, a municipality has a duty to allow the municipal law enforcement agency to respond appropriately to protect persons and property during a riot or an unlawful assembly based on the availability of adequate equipment to its municipal law enforcement officers and relevant state and federal laws. Again, it's very broad, so they can respond accordingly. What do you mean by that? So you think they can fucking shoot people? You think they can? I mean, you're leaving it very open and broad for that to be the issue. And then they're going to be, the municipality is liable for any damage, including damages arising for personal injury, wrongful death, etc. But if they are assaulted, then that's different. That takes precedent too. For instance, on this page, it says, I think 16, it says, it is unlawful for a person assembled with 2 or more other persons, and this is crucial here, and acting with a common intent to use force or threaten to use eminent force to compel or induce or attempt to compel or induce another person to do or refrain from doing an act or to assume, abandon, or maintain a particular viewpoint against his or her will. So basically, if you are protesting and you surround a person that is opposing your view or an officer, and you are trying to push them, they say that that could be bullying. So it is unlawful for you to do that. It is, again, extremely broad.
They call it mob intimidation.
Mob intimidation. So kind of like what they did to what's his name, like that would be considered mob intimidation. Rand. Was it Rand?
Oh yeah.
So they would right, Rand Paul, when they were just say her name, blah blah blah. They could potentially look at that and say that's mob intimidation. Poor guy, we need to like protect him. Blah blah blah. Yeah. They could potentially look at that. So
misdemeanor of the first degree.
Misdemeanor of the first degree. I'm gonna go over what the ACLU says too, because it's much more clear in the ACLU. So whenever a person is charged with knowingly committing an assault on a law enforcement officer, this is the second thing. That's now increased. The level of punishment is increased, especially if the officer is engaged in their duties, meaning like protecting the people, holding that riot accountable. The offense of which a person is charged shall be reclassified. So they're amping it up as follows. In the case of assault, from a misdemeanor of the second degree to a misdemeanor of the first degree. In the case of battery, from a misdemeanor of the first degree to a felony of the third degree. So it keeps going on and on and on. In the case of aggravated assault, from a felony of the third degree to a felony of the second degree. And in the case of aggravated battery, from a felony of second degree to a felony of the first degree. So again, officers, if you do anything to them, if they claim you do something to them, you could be faced with a freaking felony at this. And so there's differentiating between a normal person, you having, going after a normal person versus you going after a cop. But again, what could a cop see as an attack? Throwing a water bottle? Absolutely. They've done it before. People have thrown water bottles. They've thrown, rubber bullets and other these things, right?
It makes me worry, fam, because what if there's like 6 people just walking somewhere and they get in a confrontation and stuff? When you say normal, you mean like people who are not attending a rally or whatever? Is that what you're saying and stuff?
Yeah.
It's
3 or more people do something that they deem violent, the whole thing is a riot.
I mean,
so
really
essentially,
somebody was wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt. There was only 3 people walking. We can still fucking charge them with more than what a regular person, a normal person,
it's so
broad.
Person
not attending a rally. It is way, way too broad. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, for purpose of sentencing under Chapter 921, it says a felony violation of this section committed by a person acting in furtherance of a riot or an aggravated riot. And then they talk about how bad it is, like how it's just going to continue going up. We have, let's see, down over here, this page, I believe it's page 19. Here it is. Any person who, without the consent of the owner, willfully or maliciously defaces, injures, or damages any means of memorial or historic property as defined in this section, blah, blah, blah. Damage is greater than 200, commits a felony in third degree, punishable, blah, blah, blah. So this is like a felony in the third degree if you take down a Confederate statue, which people have been doing. So this is directly an attack on those people doing that, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. Then you go to the next page. I believe it's page 19 still. Any person who are without the consent of the owner, blah, blah, blah. I think it's the same thing.
Same thing.
And then
for that first one, they also have to pay restitution, which will include the full cost of repair or replacement of such memorial historical
property. It ain't going to be cheapy
too,
Johnny.
So when you're marked with a felony of a property, yes, you always have to pay restitution. So that's obviously part of it. That's going to be the least of their worries because they would have a felony on their record. And if you commit a burglary at the page 22, Johnny, at the very end, if you commit a burglary during a riot or an aggravated riot, burglary is facilitated by the conditions arising from this riot, then it basically means civil unrest. What does riot mean, right? It says civil unrest, power outages, curfews, or reduction in the presence of response time of first responders, etc. So they can, anything they deem a riot, basically. Then the conditions are heightened, the punishment is heightened, and they're subject to such a state of emergency may not be released until the person appears before a committing magistrate at a first appearance hearing. So for the purposes of sentencing under Chapter 921, a felony offense that is reclassified under this is ranked 1 level above the ranking. So it's going to be a higher felony. Then it talks about a burglary felony in the third degree, etc. So they classify things like how if you commit something that they deem as a burglary or something bad during a riot, then you're going to get a higher punishment. Yeah. And like I said, I'm going to go over to more of the basic stuff that you can get out of this. This is just a direct language. The ACLU did a whole thing on it.
Yeah. It's kind of just, I just want to say, Florida has a lot of these stupid draconian laws, and this is a doubling down on bullshit. Whatever the crime for sentence for murder is, should be the sentence for murder. You shouldn't, or for damaging, whatever it is. Those what the laws are. But this seems like a tit for tat kind of thing, fam. Like, oh, if you're gonna go after the insurrectionists, we're gonna go after the BLM people who did this all summer and stuff like that, and we're gonna impose harsher sentences on them if they're part of what we deem to be a riot. Right. You know what I'm saying? It's bullshit. I mean, there are laws in Florida. Like, for instance, I have an old friend from high school who's now serving a life sentence, I think, because he was committing a home invasion with a friend. The cops came in. They shot the one dude. He gets charged with that murder that the cop shoots. That's Florida fucking draconian laws. Yeah. And now they're doubling down with this bullshit over here. I've never liked that stuff when you say we can classify this kind of crime as a hate crime and make it more, or, you know, whatever the case may be. In this case now, as a riot or a protest and make it more. No, the laws are there. Whatever the price you have to pay, whatever the law is for taking down a statue should be the same, whether you're with some people or not some people. You know what I'm saying? It should always be the same. It should be consistent across the board. This is a way of them just pushing their ideology further and in your face and saying, no, our way is better than your way, and we're going to punish you more. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's hyper-partisan bullshit.
It is hyper-partisan.
So then they go on to talk about what a person commits a riot if he or she willfully participates in a violent public disturbance involving an assembly of 3 or more persons. So here they're defining what it is. So a person commits a riot if you participate in a violent public disturbance. What is a violent public disturbance? Anything could be like the LAPD calls anything a violent public disturbance involving an assembly of 3 or more persons acting with a common intent to assist each other in violent and disorderly conduct. Again, disorderly conduct, obviously if you're protesting something, you're against whatever that is, so you are engaging in disorderly conduct. I mean, they can say that that's what it is. And they talk about the different levels. Again, injury to another person, damage of property, imminent danger, a person who commits, and so if you look at this this text, everything they scratched out is taken out, and everything that's underlined has been added in, just for context, so you guys know. So they added a lot of things. They took some things out, basically making it worse. And they're talking about what it means, right? You're committing aggravated rioting if you participate with 25 or more other people. So if you have a giant protest and somebody does anything, maybe throws a water bottle, or you stay there longer than the police want you to stay, it's a riot now. Right. And so now this is an aggravated riot. It is fucking disgusting. So property damage by force, vehicles. Of course, we've talked about the police. And number 4 on the next one, it says a person commits inciting a riot if they incite another person to participate in a riot. I mean, how hypocritical is this, fucking DeSantis? You're talking about the Capitol 6 riot and you're talking about inciting violence. Trump incited violence. Well, here you go. You're saying that these people are going to be inciting violence. It's so broad. Aggravated inciting violence if it's bodily harm to another person, property damage in excess. So if you, I don't know, graffiti a building and it's more than $5,000, ooh, you're committing aggravated inciting of a riot. Or you supply a deadly weapon to another person, or you teach. So again, like, let's say Florida doesn't have open carry, do they? I don't think so.
I think they do.
They do?
I think it's counties. No, it's by counties.
It might be I'm not 100% sure if they do or not. But for instance, if you were in an open carry state like Virginia, this would be very difficult to happen. But if you're in a state like Florida, you can't have these militias there. You can't have these militias defending people because you could potentially get in trouble. I think Florida is a lot more laxo than California. Yeah. So,
can I also say the fact that once again, we've been to a lot of these protests. They're not a monolith. You know what I'm saying? People join these protests that are not, they don't know anybody there. The organizers don't know who they are. I remember the first skateboard that went through that patrol car in the Black Lives Matter, the first one we went to in LA in the beginning of the summer. That person was just somebody who just joined the, So now if that person does something bad, who was really not part of the organization, who was not, didn't do anything at the order of anybody from the organization, just acted on his own. Now they're going to deem his sins on everybody else. I mean,
Yeah,
that just seems kind of weird to
basically.
me. How do you?
But
how do you
even-
do it? Shouldn't you just hold everybody accountable, the individual, for what they do, rather than try to paint the picture on the whole protest or
Well,
whatnot?
but that's the same thing with the Capital 6 insurrection. It's the same thing. Like this is like ridiculous now, because this is directly aimed at pretty much the left. Like, this is obviously, they're going to be the ones getting, of course you're going to have some people on the right be affected by it, but I mean, the language and everything, it's definitely
It
marked
seems
on the
tit for
left.
tat
So
bullshit.
it is. And so the ACLU basically summarizes this really well. They oppose the bill because it's designed to further silence, punish, and criminalize those advocating for racial justice and an end to law enforcement, excessive use of force against black and brown people. They talk about the murders of George Floyd. Okay, so under the current law, under existing law, peaceful protests were met with tear gas, rubber bullets, mass arrest, and under existing law, armed officers in full riot gear repeatedly used excessive force against peaceful unarmed protesters. That did happen. Florida's militaristic response against black protesters and their allies demanding racial justice stands in stark contrast to the lackluster. See, this is where they talk about the failed coup of white supremacist terrorists. So again, this is like a tit for tat. It should be across the board. And they're talking about it stands in contrast. Yeah, it stands in contrast. But again, federally, they're literally pushing this whole white domestic terrorist thing. So we need to have a crackdown on these people. So if you continue to do tick for tat, it's not gonna work out. This is what's gonna happen.
A civil war here with this shit. They really are.
So here it is. Floridians wishing to exercise their constitutional rights would have to weigh their ability to spend a night in jail if the protest is deemed an unlawful assembly. Peaceful protesters could be arrested and charged with a third-degree felony for committing a riot, even if they didn't engage in any disorderly and violent conduct. Again, that's exactly what we were saying.
Deemed.
So, okay, so then they go on to mention a couple things. The bill is overbroad and vague and will chill speech in assembly. Yeah, and you should care about speech at all times.
The next one.
At
Daddy.
all
Just
times.
that one more. Right
That
there.
one. So, okay, so it's just broad. It would further create discriminatory police tactics on protesters. So committing a riot. So it creates a new statutory definition for a riot that is so broad and unworkable that it allows for an individual to be arrested for committing a riot without any requirement that the individual's conduct be disorderly and violent or that they commit any actual damage or injury. Under the bill, a person, quote, commits a riot if he or she participates in public disturbance which involves an assembly of 3 or more people engaging in violent conduct resulting in injury or damage or creating a clear and present danger of personal injury or property damage.
Bullshit. It's crazy.
It is important to note that the bill's definition is broader than the current case law as outlined by the Florida Supreme Court. The term riot at common law is defined as tumultuous disturbance of a peace by 3 or more persons assembled and acting with common intent, either executing a lawful private enterprise in a violent and turbulent manner, blah, blah, blah. Under current law, to be guilty of a riot, the individual and at least 3 others need to intentionally execute a tumultuous disturbance of the peace by acting in a violent and turbulent manner to the terror of the people. Under this bill, mere participation in an otherwise peaceful protest where there are 3 other people engaging in disorderly and violent conduct would subject all those present at the protest to a third-degree felony, punished by up to 5 years in prison, $5,000 fine, felony disenfranchisement, and all the lifelong collateral consequences of a felony conviction, including significant barriers to employment, education, and housing. I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, a felony on your record is
for peacefully showing up to protest and having to be responsible for anybody else in that protest, what they deem to be a riot. This is really an infringement of our civil liberties right here.
It absolutely is.
I'm a civil liberties guy, and I'm telling you, this is bullshit. Yep. Not everybody who shows up to these rallies or these protests are monoliths. There's people who just come along, and in fact in LA there's a lot of homeless people who show up that are pissed off that can just start something. So you're saying in a peaceful protest where the organizers have not told anybody to do anything violent or destructive. In fact, a lot of the Black Lives Matter rallies we went to, we saw a lot of the organizers making sure that people don't get too close to the cops, they stay organized, they don't do anything stupid. But then you get somebody who just joins this big march, does something dumb. Now you're going to hold everybody else accountable in that protest for what that one jerk off did. This is fascism. This is bullshit. So then you don't show up is what they're trying to do, right, fam?
Yeah, they're trying to basically crack down on protests, but also I'm even going to go further because I believe certain forms of non-peaceful but non-violent protests would 100% classify as a riot, meaning, some of these things are going to become necessary as the government continues to really just, you know, crack down on people, continues leaving them in the dust. When we're talking about what happened during the George Floyd protests, there was a takeover of some of these police precincts, and that was felt justified by what had happened, right? Like, so for me, like, the anarcho-commie in me is like, well, that's gonna happen. At one point, you're not gonna obey the law because you're protesting the injustice that's going on. So this just makes it impossible to even get to that point, because they're basically saying that if you do anything that they deem violent, then you're completely going to be taken, taken down. When we talk about the protests of the civil rights movement, you know, they weren't necessarily violent, but they were not necessarily always peaceful, right? There's a little bit of a difference here between peaceful and nonviolent, because if you're protesting the status quo, you're obviously not going to, you're protesting the law, you're protesting the current state of things, so it's not always going to be peaceful. Now you're deeming something that's not necessarily peaceful but that is still nonviolent, you're deeming that as a riot. So we're not going to be able to have the protests that we had during the civil rights movement. We're not going to be able to have these anti-war protests and all these things, because they're going to mark all of that as being just this riot where you're going to be killing people, and that doesn't happen. Like, it hasn't happened at all. I mean, the closest thing, the insurrection? I mean, come on, dude. Like, it was major property that was mainly damaged there, and there were altercations between law enforcement and people. But again, like, that always happens. It happens the other way around. They just wanted to make an example out of it, and now these people are coming back with tit for tat, and this is just as fascist as any sort of censorship that's happening. This is like on the ground stuff. Yeah. Absolutely a form of censorship on our free speech, and I'm 100% opposed to it. And it's very hypocritical of DeSantis to talk about, you know, going after Google on one end,
censoring big tech companies, and then doing this.
And that's the same thing I always bring up. I know Gloria always brings up. I know, Misty always brings up. Like, if you're against the national security state apparatus, big tech coming down, Big Brother, and you're just going to give more power to law enforcement, to these municipalities like the city, like the mayor and the state to come after you, then you're only for it for your political narrative and your political agenda. You're not for it across the board. And that's the problem I have with this hyper-partisanship. It exists both on the Republican side and the Democratic side, where they're just playing games. I'm against all types of fucking fascism. I don't care if it's on the ground. I don't care if it's big tech. I don't care if it's whatever it is. Like, I'm against all of it. And we should be completely just across the board on it, right? And just anything else. I mean, I just wanted to say, it's on the next page. It would result in the arrest of nonviolent individuals lawfully exercising their First Amendment rights for committing a riot based on the conduct of some others in attendance. Like, we know.
That's what I'm saying. That's the most ridiculous thing.
It's bad. Then they talk about the aggravating riot, the encouraging a riot, criminalizes the encouragement of somebody else to a public assembly rather than the inciting a riot. So if I say, hey, let's go to this protest, come on, yeah, let's eat the rich, bam, that could be considered a riot, and you could be liable to a felony as well. Mob intimidation, this was a newly created first-degree misdemeanor, is defined even more broadly, covering any group of three or more acting together to compel or induce or attempt to compel or induce another person by force or threat of force to do any act. So force is not defined by the Florida statute. Okay, so basically it is problematic that the force required by this provision is open to interpretation. Again, it's open to interpretation. It is so broad, and within this context, it would be very difficult to say that, you know, just three people and you saying pressuring another one to join something or drinking a beer. It just can expand so much instead of really bad precedent. So it's really bad. You guys should read if you want to understand it better in more layman's terms. But if you want to look through the creates harsher misdemeanors and felonies for existing offenses, it'll tell you how much you would be punishable by. A simple assault, which is normally a second-degree misdemeanor, for example, would be a first-degree misdemeanor punishable by an additional 300 days in jail. Yeah. So you can go down. Like, they literally say a simple battery, boom, they go it up to now it's a first-degree misdemeanor punishable by a year in jail. This is what they were trying to do to those kids in Colorado at the PSL, which, by the way, breaking news, they did
drop all the charges.
Drop all the charges. Thankfully,
and this is bipartisan as hell. Fam. This is once
Absolutely.
again. This is like, okay, you're gonna say the people who committed atrocities or went over the line on the J6 protest. Now we're gonna get back at you, and we're gonna impose harsher sentences because the whole summer Black Lives Matter and Antifa did what they did, and Donald Trump kind of spewed that rhetoric. Now they're just going tit for tat right now. This is the crossfire we don't want to get caught in. You should not have a higher sentence for the same crime that's committed for somebody else who wasn't in a protest. This is completely ridiculous.
Protest is a
and they're
First
trying to
Amendment
shut
right.
down exactly. It's freedom of speech, and they're trying to shut down protest period over here. This is a form of fascism. This is a very bad push by Ron DeSantis.
Johnny,
You should
anything?
get a lot of
Did
pushback
you want to
from
say
this.
anything on this? Okay, and the bill also protects Confederate monuments, as I've laid out for you guys. That's directly a gift
You're literally
to all those
saying that
people.
these monuments are more important than other monuments.
Yeah.
Because it's ideologically we like them and we think it's wrong that
Right.
you tear them down.
And
It's stupid.
And so just so everybody knows, it passed the Florida House. It's now got to go through the Florida Senate, and that's what's going on.
And
like
you
I
said
said,
that DeSantis will sign it when it gets to him because he's spearheading this.
well, yeah, he's spearheading it.
So.
And if they pass it by the Senate and it's signed into law, of course, then this is going to be a really, really bad thing. And in the Senate, it's called SB 484. In the House, it's called HB-1. And this is the Florida state only. So it's not a federal, it's a Florida, but it's really dangerous. And again, if it passes, other states could emulate it and continue.
I'd like to see
spreading
what
it.
some Florida congressional members say about it, though. I'd like to see what Gates has to say about this, what not, and stuff. He's supposed to be a free speech advocate. I want to hear what he says about this and stuff like that. I'd like to see him once or somebody stand up and go, you know what, ideologically, I'm against what happened this whole summer and stuff like that, but I'm against this bill right here because this is unjust. This is playing partisan politics, and we don't need to do this to further inflame anything else. So.